Hello, everyone. This is Sherry Greenhouse, Managing Partner of CRM Exchange, and I'd like to welcome you to our first session today for the Virtual Contact Center Conference. This is a great webcast. It shouldn't have to be so hard. Proactively identifying customer pain points using whole call analytics, presented by AVOKE Analytics. Now, I'm sure at this point many of you know how to get the slides, so as you came into your webinar, right there was a place where you can download that PDF. Just in case you missed that, you can always go to the virtual conference platform, make sure you log in, and right on the agenda you will find all of the PDFs for today's session, and tomorrow, within 24 hours, you'll find the recording. So everything's recorded, so if you decide you want to listen to this again, if there's others within your company that you want to listen to this, go ahead and watch those recordings. We will have a Q&A after this presentation, so if you look over in your console, you'll see the Q&A and you'll see chat. If you have questions, even during the presentation, go ahead, put them in Q&A. Those will be some of the first ones that we select. If you find any technical issues, that's when you want to use chat and you want to select your WebEx producer who is on with us today. And, of course, after the presentation, you want to go back to the virtual conference and you want to go into the AVOKE booth. Lots of great white papers and brochures, so you're going to want to download those, put them in your little virtual briefcase, and read them when you have time to read those white papers and case studies. So it is my pleasure to introduce your speaker for today. Joe Alwyn is VP and GM for AVOKE Analytics at Raytheon DBN Technologies. Now, based on 30 years of research and practice, companies have selected AVOKE Analytics to optimize customer effort, revenue, and cost efficiency. Joe was previously VP, GM of Call Center Solutions at Empirics, and has 25 years of experience turning technology innovation into practical business solutions. And we love when Joe does a webinar with us because he gets high marks. He's a wonderful presenter. I know you're going to love this presentation. It's my pleasure to turn this over to Joe.
Sherry, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the first session. Hope you're enjoying the virtual conference so far. We love these virtual conferences. CRM Exchange does such a great job on them. So what we're going to cover today is the topic of understanding customer pain. You know, customer effort is such a big deal these days that we thought it'd be good to spend some time talking about identifying, you know, why and where does it get hard, where does it get painful, where do customers feel like, you know, this is just too much effort. And, of course, we're expanding the focus now beyond kind of traditional quality, right? Generally, in quality, we're really concerned about how the agent is handling the call, and we're focused on kind of how the agent is behaving, how the agent is interacting with the customer. We're almost going to turn our listening around and now listen to the customer and try to understand the customer's point of view and try to figure out if we can use the techniques that are available and the tools that are available today to find those pain points, to find those areas where, you know, the customer's probably scratching their head saying, why is this so difficult? And where, you know, we might have high-effort moments that we can then go and work out of our processes. So we're going to do this by actually following a phone call. So we're going to listen to a call, and we're going to kind of look at that call twice. We're going to look at it first from the customer, from the caller's perspective, and then we're going to look at it again from the organization's, from the internal contact center's point of view of the call. So the scenario, and then we're going to come back around and talk about what happened and identify where are the process issues that we observed in that call and what might we do about it, what kind of tools would be available to help us find these things and actually get some insights and, you know, action them. So the scenario we have is a member of a health insurance plan, and she went and paid for some expenses out of her pocket. She now needs to file a claim to get reimbursed for those expenses, and she's gone to the website and now has to call. So that's kind of the setting. And as you can tell by the graphic here, this person ends up dealing with two agents. Looks like there's first an interaction with the IVR right here in yellow, and then a short queue, and then deals with a first agent. First agent happens to be provided by a outsourced center, and then that agent that call then gets transferred, and there's a second queue, and then the second agent in the call is actually an employee agent of the health insurance company. So that's the scheme. So what we're going to do now is actually listen in and hear how things go. And we're going to follow along on the screen. You'll see the slides will sort of highlight what's happening in the call. And what I'd like you to do is to think about maybe your quality scorecard and the process that your quality team uses today to evaluate calls. And maybe compare and contrast what you're looking for in calls with what we're going to discover as we follow this particular customer's experience along. So let's jump in and see what happens. Okay. So we'll start playing the call now.
Thanks for calling Titan Healthcare. Para continuar en español, marque 9. Please state the reason for your call. You can say healthcare professional, subscriber, or to better assist you, please say the Social Security number of the primary subscriber on your policy.
572-3789-43.
Did you say 5, 7, 2, 3, 7, 5, 5, 1, 2? Yes or no?
No.
All right. Please tell me how I can help you. You can say new policy, benefits, payments, claims, or application status. To hear these options again, say repeat.
I think I
I'm sorry,
want...
I didn't understand that. Please tell me how I can help you. You can say new policy, benefits, payments, claims, or application status. To hear these options again, say repeat.
Payments.
Please hold while I transfer you to a representative for help. This call may be monitored for quality and training purposes.
Thank you for calling Titan Healthcare. My name is Bob Smith. Can I have your first and last name, please?
Yes, it's Martha Richards.
Okay, thank you, Martha. And can I please have your Social Security number to verify the account?
Yes, 572-3789-43.
All right, thank you very much. And how can I help you today, Martha?
Yes, well, my son had visited a hospital a few months ago because he broke his leg and needed a cast put on it. And so I paid the bill in the mail, but that is supposed to be covered by my Titan Healthcare insurance plan. And so I need to know exactly how to file the right paperwork or whatever I need to do to get my insurance to cover it.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I'm not able to help you with that request. That's a claims request, so I'm going to have to transfer you over to a claims representative.
Wait, I could just do this online. I need to know...
Yep, please stay on the line and have a great day.
But I just...
Thank you for calling Titan Healthcare. My name is Amy Jones. Can I please have your name?
Yes, it's Martha Richards. I'm just calling to...
Thanks, Martha. Could you please provide me your Social Security number so I can pull up your account?
Yes, fine. It's 572-3789-43.
Thank you so much, Martha. And please tell me, how can I help you today?
All right, well, I was just on the line with someone else and explained all this. But a couple of months ago, my son broke his leg, and so I took him to the hospital, and we got a cast put on. Then I got a bill in the mail that I owed $1,500, which I paid. But that amount should have been covered by my insurance with Titan. So I'm trying to figure out what I have to do in order to get Titan to pay for that. I'm just getting very frustrated because it seems like I should have been able to do this online. But I couldn't find the form on the website.
I'm very sorry to hear that. Can you please give me your son's Social Security number?
Oh, okay, yes. It's 458-574143.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it shows here that your son should be covered for those hospital fees. Okay. What you're going to want to do is fill out Form 29F, which will allow you to file a claim to get that amount back. You'll need to attach it, the invoice that you received from the hospital, and then send it back to us. Once we receive it, your claim should be processed in about 20 to 30 days. Now, I can send that form to your current address if you'd like. Fresno, California. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So like I said, you'll get the form in the mail. Just fill it out, attach a copy of your invoice, and send it back to us, and then we'll take care of the processing of that claim for you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Is there anything else I can do for you today, Martha?
No, I'm okay now.
Okay. Well, then have a wonderful day, and thanks for calling Titan Healthcare.
Okay. So that was our call that we wanted to review, and hopefully you all had a chance to obviously observe that call and maybe evaluate it the way you did. We kind of kept, as the call progressed, on the right-hand side of the column, we kind of kept a list of the sort of speed bumps or process gaps, high effort moments, maybe pain points, whatever you want to call them, as the call progressed, and I've got them summarized on this slide here. So a couple things that you might notice, compared to how, we normally do QA, when we turn sort of our ears around and listen to the customer instead, first thing is you'll notice is that we started way before the agent picked up the call. We actually started listening to this call right when it was ringing, and we observed the caller's progress through the IVR and the queue, and then time with the first agent, and then we followed all the way time to the second agent. So the first thing, when you're really thinking about customer pain points and thinking about customer effort, is finding some way to really live that whole call the way the customer experiences it. And that's different than normally looking at a call just from agent pickup to agent release, which is all we need, generally speaking, or all we usually get from a QA system in order to evaluate whether that agent's done a great job. So that's probably the first thing that, may have struck you as we listened to that call. We were listening to the IVR portion, and I'll bet your QA team hardly ever hear the IVR portion, maybe never hear the IVR portion before they hear the agent pick up the call. We actually also follow the call through a transfer onto the second agent, and we could look at the whole experience, the second agent next to the first agent next to the IVR, and we can really understand in a big picture what's contributing to the customer's point of view about this experience. So a couple of key things here that we can summarize that we encountered. First of all, this particular organization, one of the top-level menu choices was, are you a provider or are you a beneficiary? Are you a subscriber? It would be pretty obvious. One could certainly think about having two toll-free numbers, one for your providers and one for your members. That would obviously save IVR steps. In the IVR, we encountered a bunch of problems. This is one that occurs way too often. Companies use speech recognition to capture digits, and there's no data anywhere that suggests that speech recognition is better at digits than DTMF, and of course we saw the customer encounter some retries because of that. We saw some issues with menu choices not being in a form or language that the customer understood. Some retries that didn't offer anything new. They just repeat the prompt. If a customer doesn't get the first prompt, it doesn't necessarily help to play exactly the same prompt the second time. It's usually good to, do something a little different to clarify what might have, misguided the customer. And at the end of the day, if you look at what the IVR did, the IVR delivered this caller to the wrong place. This caller should have gone to a claims rep, and they ended up with a payments rep. So here's another amazing thing about looking at calls this way. Your IVR team probably looked at this call and said, hey, it looks all right to us. Oh, yeah, there were a couple of retries, but we understand that. Caller selected payments, call went to payments. And since the IVR team can't follow the call downstream, they have no idea that this call actually should not have gone to payments. And the only reason the call went to payments is because the IVR doesn't do a good job of interacting with the customer. Okay, so what else did we learn about this call? Well, we found out this call was a multi-channel problem, right? This whole call happened because something wasn't on the website. We certainly saw some of the usual stuff about agent handling. These are the things that hopefully, everybody caught and most everybody's scoring and quality processes picked this stuff up right away for handling. We certainly see something here in this call that isn't really visible in the traditional way that we do QA, and that is the amount of time it takes for the customer to have to go through the same information over and over again. Because in quality, we generally listen to one agent's interaction with the customer. And so in that quality process, we don't even hear that the customer provided that information already in the IVR, and we're going to have to provide it yet again with the next agent after the transfer. But But when you examine the call from start to finish, you can actually observe this multiple requests for the same information. You can time it, and you can actually now quantify the amount of money that's being wasted asking for the same information over and over again. And, of course, this happens to be one of the very top complaints that customers have. And when we talk to them about what frustrates them about customer service, one of the top items is having to provide the same information over and over again. So there's kind of a little inventory of what we saw in the call. I tell you what, why don't we now move forward here and ask Martha what she thinks about how that call went.
Frustrating. I wouldn't have had to call at all if the website was set up properly and I had to repeat my same information a bunch of times. What is the point of giving my Social Security number if the next person asks for it again? And why did I have to talk to two different people? That first guy was not helpful. I ended up getting what I needed, but what a waste of time. Way too much effort just to get a form filled out.
Okay, that's probably not surprising. I mean, if we reflect back on the call, it's clear that this is likely to be Martha's point of view. It's interesting exercise is to go back and say, now, wait a minute, if I was the supervisor only in charge of the second agent, the correct agent that Martha finally got to, and if I scored the second agent, would I have this complete view of what happened? I would have no idea that the first rep was impolite, a jerk, in Martha's words. You just don't get the full view of the customer's experience when you are examining just, one agent's interaction with the customer instead of the entire dialing to hang up view. Okay, so we have now completed walking through this call in the customer's shoes and really understanding the call as it moves across the automated voice system. It moves to a partner call center, an outsourced call center. It got transferred back to an internal center. You actually follow the customer's experience through all of that. Now, let's take a quick tour through our organization structure and the various teams that handled this call. Well, in fact, we had 3 different teams service this one customer call. We had the IVR team, we had an internal call center, and we had a center that is provided by a partner, an outsourced center. In fact, in a lot of the metrics that get rolled up, this one customer call, it gets rolled up as 3 calls. The IVR team had a call, the internal center had a call, the partner center had a call. So even when these metrics start rolling up, we're already sort of taking this one experience and fragmenting it and starting to report on it as if it were 3 calls. Each of these teams are reporting their thing, and nobody's really looking at it as a start-to-finish experience. And if we go to the call center first, let's go to our internal center first, and, talk to the supervisor in our internal center. What we're going to find generally is the center leadership is doing what they should do. They're managing their metrics, and they're tracking key KPIs. They're watching service levels. They're making sure we're doing the right number of observations, the right number of coaching sessions, and so, everything looks fine. Well, we just experienced that call. Everything was not fine, and yet the call center manager has this sort of narrow view of how did my agent handle the call, and that looks okay. So we've got the immediate disconnect now, especially through that second agent. It looks like the second agent was very helpful. This call was fine. Well, actually, the call was not fine because the call had a first agent and an IVR. Your agent's handling that piece of the call might have been okay, but the call itself, the entire start-to-finish interaction process was not great. In fact, if you ask the center manager, well, where did that call come from before it got to your agent? Did it come directly from the IVR? Did it come from another agent? Was it transferred to you? They typically don't know, right? Because the systems don't allow them to have that sort of start-to-finish visibility. And if we start asking questions about the ID process, we noticed that this customer had to provide their ID information in full 3 times, once in the IVR, and then 2 more times with each of the 2 agents. And if you talk to supervisors about that, they'll say, there's usually an awareness that most agents just do full IDs, and there might be, a process or a policy that if you get a screen pop, you should do a short ID and just do a confirmation, not do a full ID. And a lot of supervisors will say, well, I know, but the fact is, agents just sort of get in the habit of doing the full ID, and they just do. And if you don't see the whole call, you don't understand the impact of that, right? So that's a really important opportunity to reduce handling time by doing a short abbreviated ID as opposed to a full ID. And it's a really important thing to move the needle on customer sat and keep the customer from having to repeat everything over again. And yet, when all you look at is one agent, you don't look at the end-to-end call, it just doesn't sort of hit you how important that is. So that's our sort of perspective of our center leadership. We go to the IVR team, we kind of have a similar thing going on. The IVR manager says, well, gosh, I mean, all my metrics look pretty good. You know, I'm not surprised that her ID failed and had to retry. I mean, the last 4 digits, you know, the recognizer had a low confidence, and so, gosh, you know, it might have been a noisy background. She might have been on a cell phone. All these excuses why the IVR didn't collect the social correctly. And if you challenge the IVR team and say, well, you know, explain to me why we use speech recognition to capture digits when the phone has 10-digit keys. And you know, usually the IVR teams will sort of, well, many times IVR teams will sort of say, well, you know, DTMF does work pretty good for digits, but we upgraded to speech and our IVR is all speech. Well, you know, then you have to ask the question, is the goal to get the IVR to be speech, or is it the goal to get the customers through the process? And of course, the IVR team had no idea that they misrouted the call to payments and the call should have gotten to claims, because to them, the IVR performed as designed. It behaved exactly like we designed it to. Well, you know, I think we have to, in these times where customer stat is so important, customer effort is so important, cost is so important, I think we've got to ask everybody to step a little bit above and say, look, your job is not to just think about whether the IVR is performing as designed. The question is it doing as much as it can be doing for the customer and for the organization? And here we have a situation where the IVR team's limited visibility of the call keeps them from even seeing that the IVR misrouted this call and even considering that there might be some improvements that could be made in the IVR to help this customer get to claims instead of ending up in payments. Okay, so then the last group that we had involved in this call was our vendor who provides our Tier 1 center. And, of course, we have a vendor management team. And, you know, the vendor management team has a bunch of metrics they track. And you know, if you go to the vendor manager and ask how are things, you know, you get typical sort of metrics are fine. You know, they're meeting all their SLAs. And so that's all great. But then if you try to, you know, drill into this one call, you know, a lot of times you can't really get direct access to individual calls in the partner's environment to understand, well, what happened to this call? You know, why was this particular agent so abrupt with Martha? And it's just, you know, the vendor manager is kind of once removed from the day-to-day operations of the vendor center, and so you kind of have an obstacle there from really understanding what's happening and looking at it in the complete context of the whole call. So we have this situation then where the call center's view of the call is very different than the customer's view of the call, and just to kind of put it on one slide next to each other, on the left we have the service experience, the experience of service as the customer perceived it, right? From the customer standpoint, this was a 6-minute interaction, right? It took me 6 minutes from start to finish. And in that time, I dealt with an IVR and 2 agents. You know, the process wasted my time. I had to go through my story over and over again. It was not great. And at the end of the day, you know what? I tried. I wanted to do this on the website. So that's kind of the customer's view. And yet, if we look at the organization's view, the organization's view is 3 teams, 3 calls, and everybody seems to be making their metrics, and everything looks great. I mean, it's just this discontinuity from managing this call as 3 independent piece parts with nobody drawing a line all through them to see what the customer's experience is like compared to the customer who is forced to live this thing from dialing to hang up and have the full experience in its entirety. So it's this difference that creates these process gaps. It's the difference between the way the customer experiences the call and the way most organizations are organized for service delivery. We're organized for service delivery in pieces and parts, and we're not organized in service delivery for managing end-to-end contact processes and end-to-end customer experiences. And the tools, therefore, don't give us the ability to even manage end-to-end visibility, right? The tools, we have the IVR team has tools to look at the IVR. Each center has a QA system for their agents. Stitching all that together can be a huge amount of work. All right. So how about some examples? We heard one example, right? We heard the example of Martha as she tried to file her claim and recover from not being able to do that on the website. Here's a few other examples that we have found in doing this sort of end-to-end analytics for companies. Here's a case where this particular IVR was actually generating call volume. In our workforce management teams, we're always trying to schedule call volume, right? And how many calls are going to come this week because it's open enrollment? How many calls are going to come this week because marketing is dropping a promotion that hopefully they told us about? Can we assemble a tiger team to work on reducing volume? And rarely in those conversations do people stop and say, wait a minute, maybe the IVR is creating extra volume. And here's a case where this is exactly what was going on. When we analyzed from start to finish how calls flowed through the IVR and then to these three centers, we had an internal center in green here, a partner center in this beige color, and a third-party center up in this orange color. When we tracked how, when all calls came out of the IVR, where did they go? What we found was this huge transfer problem. 30% of the calls that went to the outsource center was transferred to the internal center. And so the net effect of that was for every 100 customers that called, there were 125 agent-handled calls. So if those calls had gotten to the right agent the first time, there would be 100 agent-handled calls for 100 customers who called us. But since we misroute and send the calls to the wrong agent, we end up having 2 agents handle a call when it would have been just one. And so here's the case where the IVR is actually working against our workforce management team. It's actually working against our schedule. The IVR is actually generating extra call volume instead of helping to self-serve calls. And in this particular case, fundamentally there was 2 issues. There was a routing problem in the IVR, somewhat like the one we saw with Martha, and there was a problem in training in partners and having the partner reps really understand which calls they are supposed to own and resolve and which calls it's acceptable to transfer back to the internal center. So again, unless you put this whole end-to-end picture together, this problem's invisible, right? And it's just something that everybody tries to schedule and cope with. All right, another example. Here's a case where a team was assembled to reduce call volume, and they needed help figuring out what were the fundamental call drivers. And our analytics helped them actually map out different call drivers and discover the reasons for people initiating a telephone conversation. And using analytics, they were able to identify that one of the primary call drivers was mailing statements that were just confusing, printed material that customers couldn't understand, and so they picked up the phone. And so using analytics, we were able to take the entire call, find these call reasons, identify from the content of the conversation of the customer with the agent what it was about the hard copy statement that was confusing, and then we helped the customer identify some redesign opportunities in their hard copy, and as a result, reducing their call volume by 4%. So here's another case where the call center helped a multi-channel problem, right? In Martha's case, she was calling because she couldn't get something done on the website. Here, we have the ability to actually mine telephone calls and find things in other channels that are driving phone volume. And so, what we're learning, I guess, about phone volume is it's turning out to be the escalation channel. It's the channel where people go when something else doesn't work. And the first thing they say to the agent is, I was trying to do this. I got a statement in the mail, and so in these phone conversations are lots of descriptions of how your other channels are failing you. And so this can be an alternative strategy for multi-channel improvement, and that is to mine your telephone calls for this evidence that other channels are causing problems and driving call volume. So mining calls can be a pretty effective multi-channel strategy. The other strategy, of course, is build a big out that are basically saying the way to handle multi-channel is to pour all the data from all those systems into one big database, and that can be a huge effort, a massive IT project. And a much simpler project can be to use analytics to simply find those phone conversations where people are complaining about your kiosks, about your website, about your retail stores, about your delivery drivers, et cetera, et cetera. Or in this case, about your mailing. Okay, so what we have covered then is the fact that these process gaps can be pretty painful to the customer and really painful to our operations. They drive excess volume. You know, a transfer is a second agent handled call that didn't have to happen. In the case that it's an incorrect transfer, of course, properly escalated transfers are part of your process, but a lot of transfers are not according to process, and that's excess call volume. Process gaps cause extended handle time, so these things drive up costs, they drive up customer effort, they drive down customer satisfaction scores, and a lot of the challenge in finding these process gaps and learning enough about them to create an exit strategy is getting ownership for the customer experience, ownership for the entire experience from dialing to hang up, and making sure that whomever has that ownership also has some tools to actually get visibility of what that experience is like. And there's really no substitute for that direct visibility of the end-to-end experience. You can send a survey and ask the customer, how was your call, and what did you like and didn't like, but that is just not going to give you the kind of insight that an analytics system will give you that can capture the end-to-end experience, allow you to quickly go to ones that are interesting, and then relive that end-to-end experience, and maybe do that on a set that are all, you know, have some attributes, an upset customer, a call about a hard cut and handling, and then, you know, quickly view a formed view about what could be done better. So we need somebody with ownership for total customer effort, somebody with ownership for total interaction costs, and how these things apply from dial and hang up. Not just while the call was in my skill group, not just while the call was in IVR, not just while the call was at a partner center, but how all of that stitches together. Okay, avoidable transfers, you know, sometimes we call that self-inflicted call volume. You know, it's our own problems that create the transfer, so we're creating more agent-handled calls from our own issues. You know, needlessly repeated steps drives up handle time and frustrates the heck out of customers. This concept of, you know, focusing on the IVR as designed versus helping those tools really deliver maximum value to the organization. Using end-to-end analysis to make sure that partners are really integrated into that brand experience and integrated into that total handling strategy and your total service delivery strategy. And of course, if we're able to do that, we're going to really address customer effort and all the things that are tied to customer effort. Okay, so we've been through this phone call a couple ways. We lived it with the customer. We took a tour through the organization and the various departments that exist in our operations, you know, individual centers, the vendor managers, IVR team. We've seen how gaps in that end-to-end process cause frustration, cause excess cost. And so now let's talk a little bit about kind of how we can solve the problem and how we can address this. And it's really about treating customer interactions as a start-to-finish experience. You know, I've even heard some people talk about the IVR and agents as multi-channel. Well, you know, from the customer standpoint, the IVR and the agent is not two different channels. It's one phone call. You know, it's one voice channel. I'm calling you. You know, the fact that you choose to make me deal with IVR versus dealing with an agent, that doesn't make it two different channels. The website was one channel. I tried that. Chat was a channel. I tried that. Email was a channel. I tried that. Now I'm calling. The call is a channel. You know, don't think of the IVR versus outsourced centers versus internal centers, you know, as different channels. Think of it as one start-to-finish experience. And assemble a team. Sometimes, you know, frequently they're being called customer experience teams. We've also seen these groups being labeled process improvement teams. A lot of times they come under a Six Sigma, continuous process improvement kind of label. And it generally is a small team. It's, you know, it can be a person. It can be 2 or 3 people. In some of the largest corporations, this might be a team of 10 or 15. But in most companies, it's one or two people that have the perspective to think about business processes, and they have the position in the organization to interact with the senior leaders and make change. Analytics can bring insights to bear, but whether you get value from those insights is related to whether you can affect change, whether you have the ability to do change management and catalyze change in your organization. And that's partly a cultural thing. It's partly an organizational thing. If you put the analytics team in, way down in the, QA organization, there's a risk that it'll be challenging to get those insights to proliferate and to get all the way to operations leadership and to cross across boundaries from operations into IT, into sales, into marketing, because a lot of times these issues are cross-functional. They're cross-group. And so where you put this analytics group, this customer experience group organizationally, so they have access to company leaders and affect change is a big part of the determination of the factors that determine whether you're going to get value out of analytics or not. Analytics will deliver insights. The question is, how are we organized, and do we have commitment and support to make changes based on what we learn? And of course, in addition to optimizing these end-to-end processes, there's all kinds of business intelligence in these interactions, and that analytics can surface for you. So analytics isn't just to show you inefficient end-to-end handling process. It's also to give you insights about your competitors, about your products and services. So it can be an incredible source of business intelligence for the rest of the enterprise about strategic information, about how our customers are receiving our new product, our customers asking about a competitor's product. So huge opportunity operationally first, right? We take care of our own house. We get our own operation in order. We have some success. We drive up satisfaction scores. We drive down customer effort. We drive down costs. So we put analytics first to work in our own organization, and then on that success, branch out, and we can offer the strategic value to the rest of the company. And let me then, just before we get to questions and answers then, let me just say a comment about our system and how it works, because it's different. It's the AVOKE analytics system, and one of the biggest differences is that our system is not in your premise. It's not software or technology or hardware that you install in your data center, at your site or at your outsourced partner site. There's no premise technology whatsoever. It's basically analytics as a network service. It's essentially pushed up into the phone network. And so we have a system that records calls and does speech and IVR and call flow analytics on the calls. And we do it entirely in the phone network. So we don't have to connect your switch. We don't care if you're running an older Avaya, a brand new Cisco, an open source switch. Your infrastructure doesn't matter. Whether you handle calls here or send them to the Philippines and then transfer them back to Texas, it just doesn't matter, because our system is actually in the phone network. And it's almost as if we've taken the analytics system and pulled it out of your organization and put it a little closer up to the customer, And so it's almost like we're sitting with the customer, on their phone, listening in and recording the whole thing. And so that's the fundamental, one of the fundamental differences of our system versus other systems. And what that does for us is gives us this opportunity to have this end-to-end view. Because when you're in the network, you catch everything. You catch it from dialing to hang up. It also has a terrific advantage in that there's no integration, no impact on any of your infrastructure. So that means it goes in with really no IT involvement. I mean, we have to be certified by your security team. We have to work with your telephony team in order to route calls through our data center. But that's it. That's it. There's nothing else. All your systems work without any changes. And then what we can do once we are in place is we can categorize and trend calls. We can give you the ability to jump into interesting categories, and from interesting categories down to interesting calls. When you see a pattern in data, you can go right down to the customer's actual experiences, and you can really follow the call from start to finish, similar to what we just did with Martha. So suddenly you're recording for dialing to hang up, not just agent pickup to agent understanding customer pain, widening the lens out a little bit beyond just my agent, and thinking about the customer's experience, dialing a hang-up, and learning from that entire experience how we collectively, your group and all of the support functions and other groups that are involved in service delivery, how we can all work together to reduce customer effort, improve the experience, and reduce the overall operations cost of providing great customer service. Okay, so that's it for the PowerPoint and the prepared material. At this point, I would love to take some questions. Sherry, do we have questions from the audience?
We do. A bunch of questions came in, and just as a reminder, on your console, you'll see Q&A. On the lower right-hand side, that's the very last bucket. That's where you want to put your questions. Okay, here's the first one. Does the listening to a call prior to the quality monitoring disclosure violate the TCPA requirement for notification in a two-party state?
Well, that's a great question. And, as a provider of this system, we don't advise our customers on sort of legal matters, and like any recording system, it can be used legally and it can be used illegally. And so our customers evaluate that in their use of the system. I can tell you that we have our system in use in all 50 states and in Europe. And so our customers are using it, across the board, including states that have two-party requirements. And I know some of our customers have done a few things. First of all, we've seen companies increasingly moving that notification to the beginning of the call. And so you might see more and more companies are playing that notification right at the beginning. Thank you for calling. Calls may be recorded. How can I help you today? And one of the reasons for moving that notification at the beginning is to certainly cover the use of any recording technology anywhere in the call. But a lot of times it's also to cover the fact that you're using a speech IVR. So speech IVRs capture and record speech. And so a lot of companies, just in thinking about going to a speech IVR, said, we have got to move that notification to the front because the fact is the speech recognizer records the caller's utterances. And we keep them. And we keep them for training, and we keep them for, all kinds of purposes. So we're finding that a lot of folks are just putting that notification up front, especially to cover their use of the speech IVR anyway, and then there's no issue with using a system like this.
Okay, good. And let's see, our next question. How do we know what the teams are that are involved for analyzing a particular issue? We may miss the whole picture if the teams aren't correct.
Let me see. I
think another way maybe is also looking at it, what are the best way to put the teams together to analyze the issue?
Yeah. So, I guess maybe this relates to the kind of people you need that are needed in an analytics organization. We tend to find a customer experience team or a process improvement team or a Six Sigma team or an analytics team tends to be staffed by relatively senior folks in the organization who have developed a fairly broad understanding of how the company works. They have a fairly broad understanding of your service delivery strategy, the various support teams, the skill groups, the outsourced partners, how technology is used. And so as they analyze data, they're able to tease out the patterns, certainly, and the analytics helps with that tremendously these days. But then they're also able to say, as they research the issue, because they know your organization, they're able to pinpoint the support group or team or function that has the opportunity to do that better, to do that differently. And so, you do need to staff an analytics function with the right kind of person. I had a customer once tell me that the profile for somebody in analytics is part detective and part process reengineer. And, if you can find those two skills in somebody, you've probably got somebody who's a really good fit for doing this kind of work, right? Because they're detectives, because they know how to sort through data and use tools to find patterns and to find insights. And they're part process reengineer because once they find something, they can step back, look at it from a 20,000-foot view, and say, okay, I know I could redesign this. I know what these people and groups should all be doing differently to handle this better. Sherry, do you think that's getting to the question?
let's go to the next one. What is the best practice for customer effort metrics?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what. So there's two really interesting things in this seemingly simple question. One is best practice. I have to say a few words about that. And the other is customer effort metrics. I'll tell you what. I mean, best practices are really important to kind of learn from what other companies are doing. But there is rarely a one-size-fits-all solution for call centers of very different kinds. We have some companies that have technical call centers that troubleshoot very difficult problems, and they have phone calls that last 2, 3, 4 hours long. And we have other companies that have calls that last 6, 7, 8 minutes because they're about a claim, or shorter because they're about a payment, or an outage reporting. So, a best practice across widely different call types in very different industries, repeat calls from brokers versus infrequent calls from end users. It's just, I guess if you can't tell, what I'm saying is to me there's a limit on the value of a best practice. A best practice, and the other kind of crazy thing about best practices is there's so many of them. So you would think if there was a best practice there'd be one, but there's usually lots of opinions on best practice. Well, I think best practices usually give you 2 or 3 things to consider, and then you have to look at your own environment, your own strategic goals, your own approach as a company, and kind of say what works for us and our customers and the calls that we get. So I'm hesitant to say this is the best practice because I haven't yet found anything that is one size fits all anywhere. So there's the caveat. So now, customer effort metrics. Well, the classic one is the one that was introduced by the Harvard Business Review paper a couple of years ago, which was a survey that asked the question, did you feel the effort that you had to exert was appropriate or was too much or too little? So I don't recall the exact wording, but it was a carefully crafted question to ask the customer, was this more work than it should have been? Okay, so that's a pretty good way to measure effort, especially if the survey is done in a timely fashion after the event. If we wait a week before asking that question, then we're not going to get good data. If we can ask that question shortly after the interaction, then we're going to get good data on whether that interaction was high effort or low effort. And then if we ask that question by itself, that can impact the results versus if we ask that question in a survey of 12 other questions. So, and of course, the other problem with survey is just response rate and survey fatigue and, asking your customers if they get more time for you to answer a survey. So there's limitations around surveys. And we certainly deal with companies that have specifically decided they are not going to do surveys because they don't want to impose on their customers. And, heck, we have all the data. They just talk to us. Why do we have to ask the customer? We've got the recording, for goodness sakes. We can look at calls and we can draw our own conclusion about whether that was good or not. So, surveys, there are reasons where a survey, conditions where surveys can be good and where they can have their limits. So the alternative to a survey for a customer effort measurement is to actually measure the experience itself. And our analytics system, we have a thing called the customer effort index, which is a single number that rates a call based on 22 measurements of the call. So there are 22 items that our software automatically measures in a phone call. So if you think about Martha's call that we listened to earlier, we'll make 22 measurements in the course of that call. Some will be measurements about what the IVR experience was like. Some will be measurements about what the experience was like with an agent. We have measurements in there, was the customer upset? Was the customer required to repeat information more than once? Did they encounter retries in the IVR? Were there transfers? So, and all of these are automated software measurements of the call. And so now we can have a customer effort metric, which is a objective, very repeatable, very consistent measurement on the call itself. And that can be a very powerful way to track effort, to find high effort problems, to reveal whether changes that you make in your service delivery strategy, in your products, and your services suddenly cause one of those metrics to move and make something, become more difficult than it was before. Somebody makes a change and suddenly we have more transfers. Suddenly we have more cases of customers having to repeat information more than once. We have more retries. We have more misroutes. So direct measurements in the call of things that are high effort is an alternative strategy for doing customer effort measurement.
Do you believe that a visual IVR is any better option than a regular IVR system?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think at this point it's a little hypothetical. I have yet to experience one. I've been carrying a smartphone around for a few years, and so in the providers that I deal with, I haven't seen one yet. As somebody who's in industry like you, it's tempting to think that a visual IVR might be pretty compelling. If I could place a phone call and as the IVR is asking me for menu choices, those very same menu choices are on the screen of my phone. It might be easier for me to glance at my phone and make a menu choice than to wait for the IVR to drone on about all the menu choices. One of the issues with IVR is having customers memorize the 5 options so that at the end of the 5th option they remember the first one. And if we presented those on a screen on a smartphone, you wouldn't have that recall problem. They could stare at all 5 and make the choice. So I think there's a lot of reasons to think that a visual IVR could be a powerful thing. But it's just not out there yet. And I think it's an interesting question about what it's going to take for that to happen. It seems to me like one of the solutions that people are talking about is every one of my providers is going to ask me to have a smartphone app. So if I deal with 3 banks and 5 airlines, am I going to have 8 smartphone apps on my phone so I can have 8 different visual IVRs depending on who I'm talking to? Gosh, I hope that's not the answer. So I think there's a bunch of questions out there still. It seems like an interesting idea, but it doesn't seem anywhere close to being really usable on a wide scale yet.
So let's go to our next question. What is used to analyze the call? Is it the understanding of the vocabulary to post keywords that evoke a caller's frustration or their happiness?
All right, give that to me one more time.
Okay. What would you need to analyze the call? Is it the understanding of the vocabulary? If you want to post certain words, how can you tell? How can you start to analyze what tools do you need to analyze where they're frustrated or they're happy? Do you need to look at, are there certain words you're pulling out? What are you looking for?
Sure. So, I can, there's different approaches to this from different vendors. I can tell you what we do. We have, and by the way, our technology is based on a huge government research effort. BDM has been doing speech recognition and language processing research for the U.S. government for, 40 years. We've got the largest speech research team that we know of. And there's over 100 PhDs and scientists constantly working, thanks to your tax dollars, on better speech recognition and language understanding technology. So I have the tremendous advantage of being able to pull from that research base. And so if I want to find upset callers, it's a problem that my research team has probably solved. So what we do is we focus on great recognition and great language processing and being able to extract what's going on from the call based on that. And then we also have a pattern recognition technology to recognize events. So, and then we can interpret series of events in order to draw these conclusions. So let me just be a little more descriptive of that. So events can be anything that is sort of repetitive. So any touch tones, any error messages, music, any prompts from an IVR, prompts from a switch, prompts from the network. Those things are all identified using a signature analysis technology. It's much faster, much more accurate than speech recognition. And that tells us a lot about what's happening in the call. So right away we have all the digits, we have all the prompts, we have all the menus, all the cue messages that a customer encounters. Then we put the entire call through a recognizer. And as you might imagine, for our government customers, accuracy is the most important thing. And so, we have a really a great recognizer and a great set of NLP technology. And so once we've run the call through the recognizer, we now have words, and those words give us some content about what's happening in the call. And so we can now find portions of the dialogue that indicate that the customer's upset. And so we find, for example, phrases like "you people" or "I want to talk to a supervisor." Those are better predictors of sentiment, for example, than looking for amplitude to go up or for pace to increase. We find some of the non-word cues, like the volume of the speaker or the rate at which the speaker is talking, to be fairly unreliable in predicting sentiment. And yet, if somebody says, you people, or give me a supervisor, that's not very ambiguous. And so we tend to go with the content of the call to help us find things like that. So that's a pretty broad brush, and we'd love to talk to you more about it, but those are the techniques we use.
Okay, we have time for, let's see, one more question. Is there an easy way to get started rather than creating a cross-functional team, getting all the stakeholders together to agree to budget for something like that?
Well, amen. And that's a great question, because I think that, when projects take on this sort of enterprise-wide, cross-functional sort of characteristic, they get much more complex to manage. And you absolutely want to go after this in a way that you're going to have some success and some experience, and then have the momentum of that sort of attract others into the program, as opposed to trying to negotiate a big cross-functional thing out in the beginning. And I'll tell you what, I mean, vendors, if you try to do a cross-functional thing, vendors smell a bigger sale. So sometimes the providers in this space will encourage you to make it an enterprise-wide effort, because if they can do that, they're going to unload a lot more software and a lot more consulting and a lot more everything. And that's not necessarily the best way to go. So there's way too much analytics out there that people aren't using, that were bought on enterprise licenses, and they're still wondering where the ROI is. So you certainly want to start small, and in the presentation I alluded to the idea that you want to start within the contact center operation. So let's keep the number of players we have to get involved to those within operations. So, the various support teams and the centers. So let's keep it to our outsourced centers and our vendor managers that manage our outsourced partners, all of our internal centers, all the content teams that create tools and content for our agents, the desktop team that provides, the technology for the agents, the telephony team that handles moving calls around, the IVR team that handles, the IVR applications, self-service routing applications. Let's keep it in that area. Typically, all that stuff is under one VP, all under sort of a VP of operations. And even if you don't own the technology, within the operations group, there'll be some liaison that has a tight connection over to the IT organization. So if we keep it within the contact center and say, let's start first on using this technology to improve the way we handle calls, and to reduce handle time, to improve first call resolution, to improve customer satisfaction scores, and to discover some interesting insights we could take to the rest of the company. So I think if you apply analytics first within operations, with the idea of creating operational savings and improvements in customer satisfaction scores, that's the way to start. And you don't have to go negotiate to marketing, get them involved, get them to kick in money, go to engineering, get them involved, get them to kick in money. You forget all that. To start within operations. And, if you can shave 2, 3, 4, 5% of your call volume off, and you can point that to what you learned in analytics, you're going to be a hero. And if in the process of doing that, you can say, oh, and by the way, we discovered that our competitors are doing this, or we discovered that our customers feel this way about our new product, then you're on your way. And you're going to attract people through your success, as opposed to trying to navigate and negotiate some big global cross-enterprise thing.
Great. Thank you. And with that, we have come to the end of our session. It was a great presentation, and as a reminder to everybody, this is recorded and will be available in about 24 hours. And when we are through with this and this presentation closes down, please go visit the AVOKE booth, and you can download some more of the product brochures and some more information, learn a little bit more. We have our next session starting at 2:30, and it's defining soft skills, what a call should sound like. And then we have a 4 o'clock session, leverage your secret superpowers to drive customer success. So we have 2 more sessions today. And starting tomorrow morning at 11, we're having a planned chat. So if you like to chat, and this is led by Maggie Klinke from the Call Center School. So if you want to chat about things like call calibration and monitoring and analytics, come on at 11 o'clock Eastern tomorrow into the lounge area. So at this point, we will be closing down this session. Thanks so much, Joe. Great presentation. Thank you to everyone at AVOKE for bringing this information to the Virtual Contact Center audience. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your session.